Amy Bernstein, welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom. I'm excited to have you here with us today. Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much. I'm really delighted to be here with you.
So you shared an interesting napkin, and I'm going to read it out for everybody listening. It is, you cannot conquer self-doubt, but you can learn to manage it. Why did you share that with me?
Well, however many words that is, 6 words, that is basically a lifetime of experience, kind of boiled down. Like everyone else, this is self-doubt is something that I have wrestled with my whole life. And there comes a point where you want to wrestle with some of these demons and some of these recurring themes in your psychological makeup and come to terms with them. And I've worked very hard to do that. And I write a great deal about the subject, particularly the intersection between doubt and creativity, which I think is a very important and sensitive area that's often underexplored and underdiscussed.
Okay, so you're saying that there's a link between doubt and creativity based on your experience. Well, what do you mean?
Absolutely.
Like that's not where I would have gone. But okay, so what's the connection?
I'm so glad that I could surprise you. Um, the connection is this. Anyone who is any kind of a maker or a creator. This can be in the arts, it can be in the visual arts, it can be in the fine arts, the literary arts, but it can absolutely be in the world of entrepreneurship. It can be in someone who wants to start up a business or is incredibly creative in that world. So anyone who is a creator or a maker is embarking on a lot of risk taking, and the risk taking often escalates depending on where you are in that project from conception to execution. We live in cultures that are often throwing a lot of negative energy and sort of punitive energy our way. People are looking for people to fail. They're looking for people to fall, and I think that we are under supported more often than we are supported. So, particularly when you're taking creative risks, there are always voices around you and cultural forces around you that are saying, this is not a good idea. This is not going to work out for you. You're going to lose money, you're going to lose face, you're going to be embarrassed. And so it's really common to live in that kind of environment without even realizing that that's what surrounds us. This exacerbates natural conditions around self-doubt that we all feel. Am I good enough? Can I pull this off? Do I have the talent? Do I know what I'm doing? And so I think that it's very common and very easy for self-doubt to really hold us back just at the point when we're ready to take those pivotal creative risks. And it's important to acknowledge that and sort of find our way through that thicket.
That's really interesting. So, I mean, there was a great book, The War of Art, and you talk about resistance, and
Yes.
you're talking about that
Steve
same
Pressman.
idea, right? This idea
Hmm.
of resistance. And, as an entrepreneur, I really gravitated to that. And I think as an artist, you gravitated to it, which is
Hmm.
coming to it. I think, here's the other thing that I think is really interesting. I don't think that there are a lot of dissimilarities. There are more similarities between creatives, people who are creating art, and entrepreneurs. And I think neither sides, like the artists don't see the entrepreneur in them, and the entrepreneurs don't see the artist in themselves. That's interesting. Have you observed that in your work?
Absolutely. And I think you're saying, and I really agree, there's much more commonality than people realize. People tend to think, oh, artists, they're, head in the clouds, loosey-goosey, no head for business, focused on their little micro imaginary world. And whereas entrepreneurs are, tough, tough as nails, all about the grit, all about the finance, they know what's real. But I really that does a disservice to both populations, and in particular it does a disservice to the common outlook that really is shared among whenever you are going to make something from nothing, whenever you are going to start something new, when you're going to try and sort of make something in your own image, when you're going to take an idea that's only in your head and try to actualize it, implement it, turn it into a reality. You are taking fresh creative risks. And this is what artists and entrepreneurs do all the time. So they really have a lot in common.
Yeah, when you were talking about this is head in the cloud, loosey goosey. I thought you were actually talking about entrepreneurs first. Uh, yeah, so that it just shows us our own bias, I think. You talked about this idea and I like how you even use the word vision, right? The creatives and artists both have this, creatives and entrepreneurs both have this idea, this vision in their head that they try to manifest in the real world, like to bring to earth and
Exactly.
share with. And there's this deep seated desire to share the vision with others, right? That's what I think drives both sides of that creative coin. Is that something that you always had, or you noticed about yourself, or was it something that you discovered or you tripped over? How did that happen for you?
Yes, what a wonderful question. And you're just like, does a fish know that it's swimming in water? Um, I think sometimes it's hard to recognize your own temperament. There's no question, and I love the way you put it. There definitely is an inner compulsion. If you're a certain kind of person with a certain temperament, and I think this is mostly inborn. I don't think it's something that we learn. We can tinker at the margins. We can tinker with things like discipline, but you have to have an innate temperament that basically drives you to somehow want to create or want to somehow give birth to something. And I don't mean a human being, I mean something sort of creative in the idea world or whatever that may be. And I do think that I've always been this way. That doesn't mean that I always recognized it. I had a lot of quarrels with the working world. I was in the traditional working world for decades, including in some very high pressured positions in journalism and government, and fighting back against the organization that could not share my vision of how to do things differently and better. So I always had that sort of parallel mindset. What if we did X? Why don't we do it this way? Why do we do it why do we do it this way? Why can't we do this better? And I was always pushing up against, the limits that were imposed on me by the organizations that I was in. And I think I didn't always recognize the nature of my own struggle until I left the traditional working world and basically refashioned the world in my own way, and realized, oh, well, this is why I didn't do so well in organizational. I did great in organizational life, but I was frustrated. Now I'm somewhat less frustrated, or the frustrations are now of my own making. So
You said something interesting. You said you until you refashioned the world in your own way.
yeah,
Is that, that struck me, and I wrote it down because I think it's an interesting sentence. Um, so is this the struggle? When you talk about how we struggle with self-doubt, I think in refashioning the world, it feels like this big thing, right? This really big, daunting thing that, what if the world doesn't want to be refashioned, or what is my world? I can't do it. Is that the struggle that you're talking, the struggle of self-doubt?
I think a lot of the struggle is being willing to own your own risks, as opposed to taking on the mantle of risks created for you by someone else or by another organization. For example, when you take ownership of the way I was talking about, stepping out into my own to sort of to write and create full time in many different ways. That doesn't just mean, pounding out the pages of a novel. That's one of many things. When you own your own risks, you really are stepping into a whole other level of both motivation, but also doubt and fear and anxiety, which of course are all related, because now it's only on you to kind of make or break what you see, what you define as success. You have taken off some of the imposed limitations, not all, that come from organizational life, and you've taken that on board yourself. So doubt plays a really big role here because you're really stepping through a very different door.
It's really interesting when you say own your own risks. The way you said it made me sort of think that the risks are there regardless. Are we going to own them, or are we not going to own them? Was that the very subtle point that you're making in the choice of words? I know you're a writer, and I know you take words seriously. So this is why I think that you use that turn of phrase on purpose.
Well, let me put it this way, and I think that's a really great observation and distinction that you just made. Many people will go through their entire adult working lives and they're fairly miserable and they will complain vocally, but they don't make a change. And there's many reasons people can't change. They have overwhelming financial obligations and so forth and so on. But one of the reasons people don't make a change is that they are afraid to own their own risks. They're afraid to sort of step out into a bigger unknown and see what they can really do in that realm. So I think that's sometimes what that's about. And I will say that in doing this, I had moments of absolute terror. I will never forget shortly after leaving my last official job where I'm on somebody else's payroll, someone said to me point blank, "Are you crazy? Why why did you do that? Why did you leave work? Why did you leave a job? I mean, are you retired? What are you doing?" And I went into a tailspin for days. It's like, what did I just do? No one will ever pay me again. No one will ever hire me again. I just put myself into a box. What am I, I'm going to be alone forever, in terms of, engaging with the working or creating world. What did I do? And that panic lasted for a while. And really that self-doubt coming to the fore so strongly where you just don't yet believe or understand that you're going to find a way through. It's very powerful, and a lot of people will scurry back to what they know and what's safe. And I'm not saying that to be critical. That's it's a fact of life. We're all wired differently. What I am saying is that fundamentally, if you can acknowledge power and the scariness of the doubts that are there, and yet commit yourself to blowing past that, to walking with that, and still going out and taking those risks. You will find rewards that you really didn't imagine were out there for you, but you have to let the demons sort of walk with you along the way.
So, and this is your point, right? That you don't conquer the self-doubt.
Hmm.
It's the and yet you walk with it, and you conquer the demons along the way. So one of the things that I also think is you said something, don't yet believe or understand their the risks, or don't yet believe or understand their power, and you sort of use the turn or phrase both ways. I think that's really interesting because I think we really just don't understand our power to be able to handle the things in front of us. And so we don't own our own risks. We give them away. And I think even as leaders, I mean, even after you've sort of to walk with this mantra, isn't it
Hmm.
sometimes tempting to, kind of still, hand off risk to others and not take full control? Have you fallen back into that trap at times and had to catch yourself?
That's a great question. No, I don't think I've handed off risk. In fact, I will say for myself, I have doubled down each year on stepping into new risks that where I risk failing bigger. And that's been really important for me to do because you can get complacent and let your world start to get smaller very quickly. And I think the only way to fight against that is to try and keep pushing yourself. You have to find the next thing you're scared of.
Hmm.
Find the next thing you're scared of and go after that. And so I keep trying to do that very intentionally. That doesn't mean that I don't get discouraged or depressed along the way, or that the doubts don't win the day. Sometimes of course they do. I'm not trying to sound Pollyanna-ish about it, but I do think that you have to force yourself to try to fail bigger. And I don't mean fail in some catastrophic life-stopping way, like losing all your money. I don't mean that. I mean fail creatively. But I think another point you made, it makes me think that we live in cultures that in many ways coddle us. We've got a lot of organizational barriers set up to let's put them call them parameters, set up to control and help us manage and help us minimize risk. I mean, the way consumers do banking in the United States to have protected insured funds, the way we structure fixed home mortgages for decades at a time, which the Europeans do not do. They have much more risk exposure in their mortgages than we do because the rates fluctuate much more rapidly and wildly. The way we simply create our lives in suburbs and in neighborhoods, and we go to work for companies that give us some measure of protection and predictability in the workplace. Um, so we're surrounded by gatekeepers, by rule makers, by parameters, by boundaries, and when you embrace a really, really creative life that you're kind of making on your own terms, you have to dispense with an awful lot of that to go forward. And that's scary.
Yeah, I like this push to feel creatively increasingly. And there's a recent podcast by Peter Shankman who says, do the scary thing, which is very similar to your
Right.
thing where you're saying, find the next thing I'm scared of. And I think pushing the envelope on your own fear is forcing you to iterate, right? I mean, that's the reinvention, taking an invention, iterating it, making it better, making it better, making it better. And I have a mantra that I use, which is make it bad, make it better, which is also very aligned with that. So what what have you observed? So you have to be intentional with that, right? You have to be intentional with
Yes.
pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone. Talk about how you do that. What's your process? Do you have a process for how to find the thing I'm scared of?
Yeah. Um, I I can't I would lie I would be lying if I said that my process was incredibly well organized, intentional, predictable, and that I could look ahead and tell you what's going to happen or what I'm going to go after. I think that for me, I can describe it more retrospectively. I can tell you what I've done and the steps that I took and realize that I was doing that all along. In other words, I was trying to find the bigger thing. Let me try and make this concrete. Um, about we're in 2024. So let's say something like almost 5 years ago, um, I decided I was going to somehow write full time. I didn't even quite know what I meant by that. And so I knew I wanted to, I had done some fiction writing because I've been a nonfiction writer my whole life. And I sat down to work in earnest on a novel. And I have since had two novels published, which is lovely. Not enough, but lovely. Um, And I thought, well, that's it. This is what I am. I'm going to be a novelist. I'm going to write novels. I'm going to write fiction. I'm going to do books. This is it. 4 years later, that is not it. That is one fraction of so many things that I'm doing now. I could not have told you at that outset, well, I'll do the novel thing and then I'll try X, then I'll try Y, and then I'll try Z, and I'll see where it goes. I just organically pushed and grew. One of the things that I stepped into was I became a book coach, which is I went through a rigorous certification program, and now I have a small business with a base of extraordinary clients whom I'm helping to find their way through the thicket of writing a compelling nonfiction book or a marketable proposal for the publishing marketplace. I could never have foreseen that. And that's pushed me in new directions of intense risk because it's a consulting type business. And whenever you're consulting, you're taking on a lot of risk about the quality of your advice, about the outcomes you hope someone else will achieve. So these are doors that I think it's about being open to seeing the doors that you can walk through and walking through them even if you're not 100% sure. I think that's so it's a I think it's a messy process, and I think you understand it better looking back than looking forward.
Yeah, and that was the question I was going to ask you. I think that with all of these things, we become an expert looking backwards, not looking forwards, right? We can't the doing the scary thing, doing the thing that we're doing right now requires all of our attention. And if we knew how to do it, it wouldn't be scary. So like we can't necessarily
Exactly.
be there. But here's another thing that I think is really interesting, and I don't want to. I think when we do the scary thing or we prepare ourselves for the scary thing, a lot of times we spend a lot of time thinking about what wouldn't work, right?
Mhm.
Isn't it important? And do you not find it's really important to spend time on, hey, what if this actually worked? What if this actually came together? Not to lose yourself in la la land and never act. It's not like
Right.
sit there and pray to the manifestation gods that this thing is just going to fall in your lap. You have to act. But what I mean is, I think a lot of people just don't think about, hey, what if I win here? What if this works?
I think that envisioning success can be as scary as, if not more scary than, and more paralyzing than envisioning failure.
Right?
Um, So I think that's actually a very brave thing to do. I think we all need to have those dreams. Like, what if I finally get an agent and I get my novel published and I get great reviews? And these are important dreams to have. But in some realms, they're scarier dreams to have because it's almost like we're recreating conditions for failure all over again if those things don't happen. So I think you're raising a really interesting point, because what's the balance here? How do we do this in a way that's healthy for us emotionally, psychologically, and helps us to move forward in the ways that matter to us? And I think we need to do both. We need to, and I'm sure this is a concept you're familiar with, and many people have written about it, but you have to welcome failure. You have to admit that failure is part of your life as much as success may be. And you know that there's failure hidden in success, and there's success hidden in failure. And this is kind of a continuum that we live on. And I think part of it is not giving either end of the spectrum too much power. And sometimes it's just doing. Just do it. Just do the thing, and see where you go, because we can get into a lot of analysis paralysis around some of this.
Yeah, and a lot of the doing is done privately. It's
Hmm.
practice, right? It's done in
Hmm.
those iterative steps that we don't see. We see the performance athletes, the performance artists, the performance entrepreneurs
Right.
who are on stage and keynoting brilliantly in front of lots and lots of people, but we don't see them practicing in front of the mirror. We don't see them scrumpling up the piece of paper and starting over and calling their last draft crap, right? I think I think that that's a really important thing to recognize, that we have to embrace that process. We have to
It
walk
really,
with it, like you said.
yes, it really is. And you're also getting at something that this is a really important facet of the self doubt that lives within all of us all the time, because we see the final product out there in our culture. And now it's, of course, bigger and brighter than ever, because it's all over social media. It's all over television. It's all over, like, every medium that is out there, sort of yelling for our attention. We're seeing the polished product by and large, and we're not. That's not where we dwell. We dwell, exactly as you put it. We're in the making stage, right? We're practicing, we're working things out, we're solving problems, we're starting over, we're refining, we're revising, we're trying again. So what we see, what we live with, is the imperfection of our own process on the way to potentially a great, stellar, wonderful thing or product. But what we see, what's given to us, is only that end result. So there's this perception gap that we almost don't recognize it as such, but this huge perception gap between our own stumbles and the beautiful, bright, shiny thing that's out there, polished and held up to us to admire in the world. And so we doubt, well, I can't make it that good. I'll never write a screenplay that's like that. I can't do that. Well, you don't really know that. You're just still on the way. And that person didn't start there. They ended there. So I think it's a very important thing to notice, to recognize that our culture and social media and the way we use media in general now, only heightens these perceived disparities in sort of performance, achievement, and ability.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think also what people need to understand is there's no time limit for that, right? I mean, you had a career which you switched out of amidst a lot of criticism from colleagues and other people saying, "Hey, what are you doing?" And you had that own self doubt, but you had a career which you switched away from toward your creative
Right.
side, right? You embrace that and move forward. So there's no time limit on this. You don't have to. Some people knew it right away. They know what they need to do. Other people discover that. And other people have to reboot. People have to restart 50, 60, 70, whenever. Right.
Yes. Yeah. I say it's never too late. I really, really, really believe that. It's absolutely never too late. I think it really is about a major mindset shift. It's not about your chronological age. If you can achieve that mindset shift at any age, it doesn't matter what age you are. Um,
Let me ask you another question.
mhm,
Because you work with authors on books,
mhm.
and I think there's an entrepreneurial side of this that I want to switch to, and I think it's equivalent. How many drafts does it take for a book to get across the finish line, so to speak?
Well, the flippant answer is as many as it takes. Um,
Right.
let me put it this way: the process of writing a book that is meaningful, that connects with readers, that finds an audience, it is a lengthy, difficult process that entails many, many, many layers and levels of effort along the way. And writers always get frustrated and exhausted at a certain point, and that's when they most need to keep going. So there's no fixed answer to that, because writing a book really is about your attitude towards that work. It's about this notion that I haven't figured all this out yet, but I'm going to. I will persist in working on this until I untangle what it is I need to get down onto the page, until I make meaning. And so it depends on the book as to how that plays out. I mean, doing that for a memoir is a different level of effort than, a narrative expose, you know, in the
Anybody ever
nonfiction
say
world.
that it was easier than I thought?
No, no, I don't think anyone has ever said that. And if they think that, I think they should keep it to themselves, because I just, I don't buy it. I don't buy it.
That's great. Um, so a new thing that we're doing, Amy, with Paper Napkin is at the end of each episode, we're giving a shout out. So shout out obviously is a term that we love to use in our organizations, which is where we celebrate somebody else for some particular reason. It doesn't have to be a real reason. It could be any reason that's important to you. So let me ask you, before we say goodbye, who would you like to shout out today?
Well, my shout out has to be to a community of people. And I say that because writing and creating can be a very, very lonely endeavor, and you do not feel seen or heard, and you do not know if what you're doing is making any sense, and you feel like you're living in a vacuum. So I could not go forward, and would not have gone forward with all the work that I'm doing, without an incredible community that I am now a part of book coaches around the world, who see and hear each other and really support one another's work, and sort of journey of making that kind of work, as well as the writers groups that I am in, where again, it's about feeling respected. It's about having your process recognized. It's not about people coming down hard on you about what they think you've done wrong. It really is about support and encouragement that I get from people every single week, often many times a day. And I could not function in the kind of creative work I'm doing without those people. And everyone in the creative field needs that community of support. They need to feel seen and heard by people who understand what it is to live a creative life.
And what is the name of that community? Sorry.
The Author Accelerator Book Coach community is
Wonderful.
a massively supportive community of writers, editors, authors, book coach consultants, who are doing incredible work on behalf of other authors, but also really on behalf of one another.
That's great. I believe firmly that what you appreciate appreciates. So thank you for sharing some love with them. And thank you for sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you. It's been a great conversation.